You know, celebrities are just like you and me. They walk their dogs, they get divorced, and they love watching people beat each other up in a cage. But unlike us, celebrities sometimes have the opportunity to make an impact on mixed martial arts, sometimes in major ways, like the 10 famous folks we're going to talk about today. I'm Tommy from MMA On Point. A massive shout out and thank you to our channel Hall of Famers for making these types of videos possible. And these are 10 celebrities who played vital roles in mixed martial arts. Number 10, Ed O'Neill. So it's super popular now for celebrities to do jujitsu. Like we got Tom Hardy out here winning tournaments and shit. But a lot of that is from more recent years with the massive popularity of combat sports. Al Bundy, who has a black belt under Rorion Gracie, started training in 1993 before the UFC even formed. He's even said his black belt is the greatest achievement of his life, minus his kids being born, but you know that he has to say that. It's definitely the black belt. In addition to being an early adopter of BJJ and MMA in the celebrity sphere, O'Neill has been a great mainstream ambassador for mixed martial arts, and he was doing it at times when you would get people looking at you funny for doing so. In 2002, ESPN did a piece about the sport and whether or not it was legitimate, with plenty of the usual characters using the phrase human cockfighting. But old Ed, all the way back then, was there to defend it and talk about his BJJ experience.
The guy attacked a friend of mine in the street, and I pulled him down from behind and I put a rear choke on him and I choked him out.
And the man knows ball. Here he is with Dana giving a spicy hot 2012 hardcore fan take on John Jones.
You'll take a guy like John Jones and you'll say, he could probably beat heavyweights. I don't think he could beat Dos Santos.
Based. What makes Ed perfect to kick off this list is that he's kind of the proto-celebrity ambassador of the sport. And as I said, he was doing it at a time when not many others were willing to stick their necks out for something seen as very much not part of the mainstream. So while his contribution is small, being an early adopter means he makes the cut. Number 9, the UFC investors. We couldn't do a list about celebrities impacting the world of mixed martial arts without talking about the 23 who bought into Endeavor at the behest of their buddy and possibly their agent at some point, Ari Emanuel. Now, these celebs were all fight fans, otherwise I doubt they would have forked up the minimum $250K investment. But yeah, it is quite the group. Rocky, Marky Mark, the Patriots, Batman, Medea, the mayor of Flavortown, among, of course, many others. It's a veritable who's who of random people with money. Conan O'Brien, my favorite member of the group, is probably the best celebrity fan on the list. He's had some classic UFC interviews on his late night shows, going way back to when Joe Rogan still had hair. The terms of the investment were not disclosed, but Dana mentioned in an interview once that they were timed, I guess, to go back to them at a certain point. Doesn't sound like that was the case for all of them though, and some invested much heavier than others. Like Mark Wahlberg apparently has $40 million in the promotion. A pretty wild number when you consider that's how much it took the Fertittas to keep the UFC alive until Tough. Number 8, Kevin James. Besides being a super fan that goes all the way back to watching Boss Root and Liver Kick Poor Souls and Pancrase with Joe Rogan, Kevin James has done quite a bit to try and put MMA in a mainstream light. And a bit like Ed O'Neill, he was doing it back when most people assumed the sport was still outlawed and can only take place on boats in international waters. On an episode of his massively popular sitcom King of Queens, James managed to get Randy Couture, Dan Henderson, Frank Trigg, and Rampage Jackson on an episode. And in my humble cartoon opinion, his film Here Comes the Boom might be the only mixed martial arts movie worth a damn, Warrior aside, although that one's a bit dramatic. Still hoping one of these days we get our own Rocky, but anyway, for regularly employing Boss Rutan alone, Kevin James belongs on this list, but for his contributions to putting MMA in mainstream culture, movies, and television, he certainly has earned a spot. Number 7, Mark Zuckerberg. Buying out an entire UFC event by himself and having a spar with Izzy and Volk is not the only contribution Jesse Eisenberg has made to mixed martial arts. Way back when consuming everything online wasn't yet a thing, the UFC and Zuckerberg partnered to stream event prelims on Facebook starting with Fight Night 23 back in 2011. A pretty groundbreaking partnership when you think about it, given how much large social media platforms have become a major component of live sports. The partnership would lead to the UFC breaking off on their own with Fight Pass eventually, but what goes around comes around again because these days, the UFC and Zucks are partnered again for VR Fight Pass Pass via MetaQuest. Not sure this will end up being as groundbreaking as streaming live sports turned out to be, but hey, maybe we'll all be vegging out on our couches, watching UFC 350 from Bruce Buffer's perspective, and living out our entire lives in the metaverse real soon. Number 6, Mark Burnett. Now, if you don't know Mark Burnett by his name or face, you certainly know him by the 900 ultra-popular reality shows that he's produced. The Apprentice, Survivor, Shark Tank, The Voice, The Contender, remember that one? With Stallone, that was a pretty good one. Anyway, Burnett's contributions to MMA are twofold. First, he conceptualized and produced one of the most seminal television shows that's ever featured mixed martial arts. No, not The Ultimate Fighter, Bully Beatdown, which was massively popular during its 3-year run on MTV, and certainly exposed a lot of non-fans to the fact that being a jerk doesn't mean you can beat up a professional fighter. These days, Mark is working in the shadows at PFL, investing major bucks into the brand, and since 2018 has served on the promotion's advisory board. A year after he signed on, they got the ESPN deal. Not saying it was one of the most well-known and powerful television producers in the world that helped get that done, but I'm guessing that it couldn't hurt. Suck it, Jake Paul. Number 5, Ron Perlman. If you ask Ron Perlman, the awesome actor probably best known for Sons of Anarchy and Hellboy, although personally I always think of him as Vincent from the 80s Beauty and the Beast TV show, he has absolutely no idea why he's working for the UFC. I joke, of course, Perlman has been a well-known longtime fan of the sport, and I'm gonna go ahead and guess that Dana White was a longtime fan of Sons of Anarchy. This led to a partnership that started in 2018 that has made Perlman the iconic voice of UFC promo packages going on 6 years now. But Mike Rowe walked so that Ron could run. The famous host of Dirty Jobs and tons of commercial VO whenever they need a rugged-sounding American was the voice of The Ultimate Fighter for 70 episodes going all the way back to the very first season. And so he definitely at least deserves a mention in this entry. Number 4, The Rock. Shoes. The Rock has provided fighters shoes for the walk from backstage to the octagon. That's what he's contributed.
These shoes fucking suck. Fuck these shoes.
Alright, number 3. I'm just kidding, he's done more than that. So if you're from space or something, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, is a football player turned pro wrestler turned movie star turned human Ninja Turtle, who very recently started making an impact on the world of mixed martial arts. There were the aforementioned shoes, of course. Rock presented the original BMF belt to Jorge Masvidal. He is at current preparing for a role as Mark Kerr in the Smashing Machine movie, where he'll finally get to fight in Pride FC. But more than any of those things, Dwayne Johnson now sits on the board of directors for TKO, the parent company of the UFC. TKO's parent company is still run by Ari Emanuel, who pretty much has total control. But if you think his good buddy and megastar the Johnson doesn't have some sway on his decision making, then you can check your monkey ass directly into the SmackDown hotel if you smell what The Rock is cooking. Number 3, Donald Trump. Did you guys know that real estate magnate and reality TV star Donald Trump was president of the United States? It's some pretty deep lore trivia, but yeah. And turns out the guy has also had quite the history with combat sports, going way further back than the UFC even, as the Trumpster was involved with boxing and pro wrestling on many occasions, largely because of his now defunct casino in Atlantic City. Don would provide a venue for the first Fertitta-led UFC events back in 2001, at a time when venues weren't exactly knocking down the UFC's door for business, and old Dana never forgot it. The two have been thick as thieves ever since. Well, minus that time Trump was a major investor in one of the only brands that could have potentially challenged the UFC in Affliction. Of course, Josh Barnett imploded that company, but hey, if a single failed test is gonna topple you, maybe the foundations weren't that strong, you know? Anyway, now Trump gets his own walkouts during UFC events. Number 2, Mark Cuban. These days, if you want to watch regional MMA, your go-to is definitely Fight Pass. But for a very long time, the best showcase for up-and-coming talent outside of the major promotions was HDNet, which would later become Access TV. And that channel was founded by none other than .com billionaire Mark Cuban, who you probably know from TV. .coms were websites people used to go to on internet browsers, and his website, broadcast.com, sold for $6 billion, making Mark a very rich person in an instant. HDNet Fights, which started in 2007 during the Tough boom, was Cuban's idea, and partnered with pretty much every promotion you probably have heard of outside of the UFC to fill up their weekly programming. In addition to these fight cards, Inside MMA was a vital news and interview resource before the era of social media. Cuban also famously tried to put together a fight between Fedor and Randy Couture for HDNet after Randy walked out on the UFC, but the whole thing ran into some legal troubles, as you can imagine. Mark was also a major investor, just like Trump, in challenger brand Affliction. The guy took a pretty good run at mixed martial arts for a while there, and in some alternate timeline, Cuban bought the UFC, and Kenny Rice and Bas Rutten called McGregor Diaz. Number 1, John Milius. If you don't know who John Milius is, first of all, shame on you. Secondly, you're probably in your 20s because the dude wrote and produced classics like Apocalypse Now, Red Dawn, and the greatest movie ever made, Conan the Barbarian. Milius was a cartoon character of a human being in real life and got into lots of wild shit, which led him to being one of the masterminds behind the UFC. John was a student of Rorion Gracie during that pivotal early 90s era. In fact, it was he who introduced our number 10 entry, Ed O'Neill, to the sport. And so Milius and Gracie, alongside Art Davie, would get the ball rolling on the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Milius was vital in finding investors for the venture, but his creative mind would go a bit too far in the presentation department because he wanted a moat filled with gators surrounding the fighting area. Unfortunately, that wasn't going to work, but the octagon-shaped cage that he came up with did. It's possible UFC 1 doesn't even happen without Milius and his Hollywood cachet, making the venture seem like a feasible possibility to Gracie, which makes John the most vital celebrity to ever get involved with this crazy sport because he really helped to form it in the first place. I'll tell you who was vital to the creation of this video. It's editor Luke Taylor. He did a fantastic job. Please follow him on all his socials and go check out his YouTube channel. Again, a huge thank you to our channel Hall of Famers. You guys are truly the best and you help so much with these videos. If you want to be a Hall of Famer too and get exclusive content, hit that join button down below. Like and subscribe if you think you could tap out The Rock. Leave a comment down below about your favorite celebrity that's involved with the sport. And thank you so much for watching, you guys. I'm gonna go have a drink. Cheers.